also had one client who came to me and he said his customer was a big bourbon drinker, but he didn't want to send another bottle of bourbon to him. So I found an artisan who handcrafts writing pens out of decommissioned bourbon barrels. So we found out what his favorite brand was, and the artisan had access to that brand's barrels. So he hand carved a pen, and we had his initials engraved on the pen. And it came with a certificate of authenticity. And so it was, I wrapped it, put in the handwritten note, and shipped it. And my client got an email from his client, and the subject line was "Wow," capital W, capital O, capital W. And then the body of the email was, "Dear Kevin, I received your gift. This is really cool." And so, the other reason why you give a gift is that every single time he uses that pen, he thinks about my client.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with Deborah Myers. She is the CEO of Virtu Art, where she helps businesses increase customer retention, build loyalty, and gain more referrals by cultivating meaningful client relationships. With a unique approach that blends personalized appreciation strategies with curated one-of-a-kind gifts, she shows companies how to create sticky customers who stay longer, engage more, and refer frequently. Before starting Virtu Art, Deborah spent more than 30 years in international economic development, working with corporations, governments, and non-government organizations to build partnerships and expand opportunities for women worldwide. Today, she brings the same expertise in relationship building to help businesses grow through connection and gratitude. Congrats on helping businesses grow through connection and gratitude, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Carl. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on the show to talk about this because it's something that I think is a huge area for improvement in a lot of business relationships, is the ability to give personalized gifts or just giving gifts at all that are meaningful to the recipient. And so I'd love to hear more about your experience and how, when you're trying to build these connections and stronger business relationships, how gift giving is a way that people are often unaware that can make a huge difference in that process.
Sure. So I started my business with personal gifting, and I was mainly working with people who had no clue in terms of what to give somebody. And what I learned from that was that the main reason that these people had such a difficult time figuring out what to give someone is because they really didn't listen and pay attention to the person that they were going to give the gift to. And that carries on into our business relationships, because most businesses, I have found, know very little about their customers. And the very first question I'm always asked is, well, how can I get to know my customer without asking them directly, their interests, their hobbies? And I say, well, we start every conversation with an icebreaker question, whether it's, do you have plans for the weekend? How was your weekend? Are you going on vacation? I mean, there's just a whole number of questions, but most people never listen to the answers. They are more interested in getting onto the topic that the meeting was called, or the reason for the phone call. And what I tell my clients is the answers to those questions start to give you the picture of who your customer is as a person. And so I emphasize really trying to build the relationship by getting to know your customer. And most people will tell you more about themselves without realizing how much they're telling you. And if you just listen and take some notes, when it comes time that you want to do something for your customer, it no longer becomes a struggle in oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And what happens, and particularly as we get, we're coming to the end of the year, and this is when most businesses think about their customers. They don't think about them really throughout the year. It's at this time. And businesses end up doing what I call check the box gifting, which is it's the end of the year. We need to do something. Oh, let's give them that bottle of wine, that, fruit basket, that tin of popcorn. And if they had really listened and heard their customer, that they would be able to find something, give something that would be meaningful to them and will have a huge impact on their relationship.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned people just complain about not being able to find a good gift for someone, but then it's because they're not really listening to people when they're communicating with them. They're not really showing interest in them as a person. They're just trying to get to the business side of things. And I think they forget that trying to get the business side of things done is easier when you're actually communicating with people as a human being and see them as a person they feel understood and listened to.
Exactly.
And so I think, yeah, when it comes to relationship building, what I've stuck in my mind is the adage of strive to be interested, not interesting. So the more you show that you're interested in other people, the more they're going to reciprocate in that and be willing to listen to what you're saying. But you got to start by listening first. And so I can see how your advice to your clients to make sure they build that listening muscle and start taking notes and caring about their clients beyond just the transaction is the key to building these strong relationships and making the gift giving part easier. And then, yeah, you can tell when you're getting one of those checkbox gifts where it's like, you can tell it's like they don't really know. And it almost does more damage than if you didn't send anything.
Absolutely.
Because you're basically saying, yeah, we don't know you that well, so we're just going to do this generic thing because our relationship is so bland or uninspired. So it's I wouldn't be surprised if they do, or like if they give us something like, oh, you didn't realize you're allergic to nuts, to give you this like mixed nut thing. It's like that's even like worse. So so I can see definitely why, especially if it's like a financial planner or a CPA, someone who's working directly with the clients every day, the client facing people that runs a business, having that gift giving experience or gift giving mindset helps them. But I can also see that scaling for like larger businesses that have more people involved, there's still ways these days to give more personalized gifts. You just have to be willing to put a little bit of effort into it. But the results when it comes to especially like moving these big B2B deals forward can be huge if you're able to surprise a decision maker with a gift that they're going to love because they told you about like their vacation last summer. And so to like start like in the Mediterranean, so you sent them some like extra thing involving like show that you heard them what they love about the gift. And like it's like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I was talking about. That makes the business deal side of things a lot easier to pull through because you're connecting on a much deeper level than just a transaction.
Right. So there's a couple of things here. So absolutely. And when somebody gets a gift or even, a handwritten note that looks that it is meant for them, it's not something that's being sent to, 50 people or 100 people, that person thinks, one, they heard me, they listened to me, but then you have done something that is specifically for them and meaningful to them. And that's something that they'll remember, for a very long time. How many, going back to your example of somebody, sending nuts to somebody who is allergic to nuts. The very first thing that person would think is, if Deborah really knew me, she would know I can't eat nuts. And so you're right. In some ways, it does a lot more damage because you're highlighting that you really don't know, your customer. And so I'm with you that it's better to do nothing than to, send something that will, end up having a negative impact. And most businesses think that food and alcohol is the easiest thing to send, when in fact it is the hardest thing to send because of people's allergies. With regard to alcohol, do you know if the person drinks? I can't tell you, I can't tell you how many stories I've heard from people who received, bottles of wine and they don't drink. But nobody's taken the time to ask, or to try and find out. So the key is, but going back to building the relationship, the other thing that I tell my clients is that when you're talking to your customer and, he tells you about his grandchildren or his children, then the next time that you have a conversation with him, ask him about his children or his grandchildren, because again, it shows that you listen and that you're asking about something that's important to him, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the business, the transaction you're working on. It's about him. And again, that has an impact, and that, as you said, kind of makes the business go a little easier because they feel that they're talking to somebody who is listening to them.
Yes, I imagine what you mentioned a lot of the times you've seen people send food or alcohol and have it be a big mistake. So you must also have some great success stories of helping people find these sort of gifts that their clients really enjoyed. Can you share some of those success stories to show people
Sure.
the way it's done?
Sure. So I'll give you a couple examples. So I had one client who came to me and he said his customer was a big bourbon drinker, but he didn't want to send another bottle of bourbon to him. So I found an artisan who handcrafts writing pens out of decommissioned bourbon barrels. So we found out what his favorite brand was, and the artisan had access to that brand's barrels. So he hand carved a pen, and we had his initials engraved on the pen. And it came with a certificate of authenticity. And so it was, I wrapped it, put in the handwritten note, and shipped it. My client got an email from his client, and the subject line was "Wow," capital W, capital O, capital W. And then the body of the email was, "Dear Kevin, I received your gift. This is really cool." And so, the other reason why you give a gift is that every single time he uses that pen, he thinks about my client and my client's business. And I'm sure that he's told other people about the pen, which then also, gives him the opportunity to talk about my client, and his business. So that is one example. Another example was this client is a CPA, and he was onboarding a new client and going through their financials and working with them on some financial goals. And so he came to me and he said he really wanted to give this couple a gift, and but he didn't know that much about them. He only knew what their financial aspirations were. So we decided that we would give the husband a gift and the wife a gift. And it was her aspiration was she wanted to take a beach vacation. So I found a really nice beach tote bag, had her name embroidered on it. And for the husband, he wants to build a lake house. So I found coffee mugs that then had the last name engraved, and it said, Richmond's Lake House on it, and shipped them. And a few weeks later, my client sends me this link to a LinkedIn post. And so his client had gone on LinkedIn and posted about how he felt you know, as a customer or client to this CPA, and the surprise and delight that he and his wife had receiving the gifts, and even more, you know, impactful was that they were related to their financial goals. And so my client in the email to me with the link said, my hope was that you would help me make my clients feel special, but I never expected something like this. And then, you know, it gave me the link. So those are two examples. And each of them is listening to, you know, to what the client, you know, like, dislike, hobbies, you know, there's just a lot of information you can use.
Yeah, and I was, as you were telling those stories, it reminded me of some other times where I've heard people explain how that sort of personalized gift giving can help with business activities. Where there was a guy who was talking, I mean, there's one example from I think it was one of Mike McCowell's books about, there was a guy trying to get the attention of a CEO who was known that he was a very big fan of this Italian shoe designer. So he got the guy's size from his like secretary or associate, and to get the meeting with the guy, he mailed the guy the left shoe of the pair of shoes and said, "If you come meet with me, I'll bring you the right one." And he got the meeting, but again, he just showed that he knew the guy well enough, like, and he knew he really liked these things, that's the way to stand out from all the other people trying to pitch him their ideas. Or there's someone else I had on the show earlier. I think you should meet. He was talking about how when he is helping companies like a pitch, they'll, instead of just like emailing a PDF with the pitch, he'll mail it in a box that's all nice and printed out, but also include like a batch of cookies in the thing. So as people are reading the proposal, they have something to munch on that's customized. Like, oh, this is yummy. So it's the same sort of, I think philosophy of not just doing the bare minimum to connect with people, but having something a little more personalized or a little special, standing out in a way that makes a huge amount of difference these days, especially with how inundated people's inboxes are with the samey kind of salesy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The more personalized gestures, whether it's before the sale or after the sale, goes a long way for making a difference and standing out and building a real relationship instead of just coming across as someone who's just interested in the sale.
Right. Well, somebody told me, this was not me, but somebody told me that her husband is an architect, and his firm was, you know, bidding on a project, and they, you know, went in and made their presentation. And then he sat down and wrote a handwritten, you know, thank you note for giving them the opportunity to, you know, to make the presentation. And if they had any other questions, you know, to please call. And so they ended up winning the project, but they were, you know, he was told that they weren't like the number one firm, but what won them over was taking the time to thank them through a handwritten note, and not, you know, just, you know, an email saying, you know, thank you. So yes, those little things that most people kind of, you know, they go, you know, I don't really have time, can make a big difference. And in our business, yes, we do gifts, but we also do a lot of handwritten notes for our clients, because it just is that one thing that helps them to stand out, you know, with their clients, with their, you know, prospects. So I really believe if you take that extra step to show that, you know, that the person is a person and not just, you know, a sale or a transaction, that you will definitely start to build that relationship. And ultimately, your clients look at you for the value that you're bringing, and not just, you know, the service. And I have a story of somebody who said that, you know, they they were doing business with one insurance company and moved their, business to another insurance company. And he said, I get the thank you card when my policy is being renewed. I get that call on my birthday to wish me a happy birthday. And they do a few other things. He said, now if somebody came to me and offered me insurance for free, I would tell them no, because of the relationship and the value that this company brings to me.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of how that, when you're talking about like what we mentioned, like sticky customers, that sort of personalization and the relationship keeps people from being swayed away by a better deal or a flashy offer, because they have a deeper connection on a more personal level than the transactional one. And the other people offering those flashy deals often don't have the same personalized service or the relationship there. And so there's a lot more uphill battle for them to try and woo people away when they have a stronger relationship with a particular company. And it's something that I think more businesses need to realize and act on. So thank you so much for connecting with me today, Deborah. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please like, leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Deborah, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.